In 1968, Life magazine ran a cover with two boys from Africa who had been killed in the civil war in a region of Nigeria. That civil war and the famine that it caused killed over 1 million people. And there was a teenage boy who saw that magazine cover and took it to his pastor when he was 13 years old. And he asked his pastor, he said, "Does God know how many fingers I will hold up even before I put them in the air?" To which his pastor replied, "Yes, of course he does." And then that boy pulled out that copy of a magazine and asked his pastor, "Did God know that this would happen to these boys before it did?" To which his pastor said, "Yes, I know that you don't understand, but yes, he did." That boy walked away from the church, never to go again. That boy's name? Steve Jobs. You know, it's not just influential people like Steve Jobs, but there are many people that I've interacted with, some of you who are even watching, who have walked away or pushed away Christianity or stopped going to church because you say, how could a good God allow so much suffering in this world? I've personally spoken with lots of people, and that is their hang-up. How could this good God allow so much innocent people to suffer? And I personally don't know the answer. I've tried to study it. I've read books on it. I've delved into it from philosophy, from theology, from the scriptures. And it's so hard for us to comprehend why any of this happens, especially when we look at the world today. This pandemic and the economic crisis that it has caused has left millions out of work, hundreds of thousands dead, perhaps millions when the toll is finally brought in. And how many of the hundreds of thousands or millions of people who will go hungry in our world or even in our nation who will become homeless because of this pandemic? We look at it and we wonder, why is there so much suffering in the world? But the reality is that none of that takes away from the fact that God cares. Even though we don't understand why He allows certain things to happen, I think we can know definitively that God cares. That He cares, that He loves us, that He doesn't want anyone to suffer. And the reason why we can know is because Jesus suffered. In fact, the suffering of the innocent Jesus shows us that God cares. The suffering of the innocent Jesus shows us that God cares. I believe R.C. Sproul was absolutely correct when he asked the question, why do bad things happen to good people? That only happened once, he answered, and He volunteered. See, Jesus alone is the only person who's innocent. We all have sinned. Every single man, woman, and child has done what is wrong, sin. Now we can debate about how damaging the sin is that a child could commit. We can wonder, well, what should the punishment be? But the reality is every single person from the age of small children has sinned deliberately, not accidentally, but deliberately. Each one of us, by thought, word, and deed, by what we commit, our commission, or what we don't do, the good we should do, that's sins of omission. We are sinners, and all of us are not innocent, and yet Jesus was innocent. That's what Peter writes about the man he knew personally. I mean, he could have seen anything that Jesus did wrong or any sin that he committed or any stray word that Jesus said that was not okay. But Peter spent time with Jesus. He heard what he said. He knew everything about Jesus for the years that he spent with him. And yet he still says that Jesus was innocent, perfect, and righteous. That's what he says in 1 Peter chapter 3. Verse 17, we read, "For it is better, if it is God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil." Verse 18, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, the righteous for the unrighteous, to bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit." See, Jesus was the one innocent, perfect, righteous man who did everything that He should do and didn't do anything wrong that He shouldn't do. Jesus was the one innocent man, and yet He willingly, knowing that death was coming, went to suffer and to die on our behalf. Jesus alone is the innocent sufferer. The suffering of the innocent Jesus shows us that God cares. God cares enough to take that pain upon himself, to suffer in himself, his own Son, to die an excruciating death. But he did that so that anyone who sins can be forgiven if they put their faith in Jesus Christ. So that though we do suffer in this life, we know that this suffering is temporary, and there will not only be healing, but there will be redemption. There will be the healing for the nations, it says in the book of Revelation. There will be no more sickness, sorrow, pain, or death, that everything will be made right and perfect in the new heaven and the new earth. Even earth itself will be made right without sickness and plague and coronavirus and unemployment. See, God will do all that, and he shows us that he cares and that he loves, and he wants to bring people out of the suffering of this world and in to the redemption that he has for them. And we know that he cares because of Jesus, an actual historic event, the death of Jesus Christ. The suffering of the innocent Jesus shows us that God cares. Is the suffering in the world something that you struggle with? I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, comment in this section. Is it something that you're saying, I don't know if I can believe, or I don't know how much faith I could have in God? If that's something that you're struggling with, I want to hear from you. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this subject. But remember, no matter what, God cares.